The question is, how do we live with each other so it doesn't destroy what God wants to do through his church? As long as there are people, there will be problems. You see, avoiding an offense is impossible. We're going to get offended by something. The question is, are we going to live offended? And did you know that this problem is not new? This problem didn't just start with the invention of social media. This problem started clear back in the very first church as well. In fact, just 20 years after Jesus has died and resurrected and declared that everyone should go out and tell people about him, and the church launches and he ascends into heaven and all is grand, just less than 20 years after that, we read about a situation where church hurt was overtaking a church. We read about this from this guy named Paul, who started all these churches around the Mediterranean rim in the first century, and he starts sending out these letters to these different churches. And some churches, it's kind of like, yep, this is from Paul, the apostle of Jesus, sent to, teach you about Jesus, and just sends it out. But sometimes he gets really focused, like to the church in Galatia, he was mad at. He just starts off with, I am astonished. But then you get to the church in Philippi, the church of the Philippians. And he writes this letter to them, and he starts with such flowery words. I thank God every time I remember you. And in the book of Philippians, we have all of these great statements that make it into our Hall of Fame of statements, or the Hall of Hobby Lobby. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Whatever is good, pure, noble, and praiseworthy, think on such things. These are great statements. They all come from this letter to that church in Philippi. Well, I want us to take a look at one of the particular passages in that letter. If you have a Bible, you can open up to Philippians chapter 4 and hang on to that. Philippians chapter 4. And what we're going to read here is we've just walked through this entire letter, and Paul has laid out all these incredible things about how good God is, how great they are, how much he loves this church, and how God's going to persevere. And then he gets to chapter 4, and he has to deal with some church hurt. He deals with two particular individuals who are not getting along. Take a look at what he says here. Philippians chapter 4, verse 2. I plead with you, Euodia, and I plead with you, Syntyche, to be of the same mind in the Lord. Yes, and I ask you, my true companion, help these women since they have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of my co-workers whose names are in the book of life. Apparently, there is a cat fight going on in the church, and Paul has to address it. Can you imagine if your little fight with someone in the church ended up in the Bible? I mean, that's epic, These ladies have got to be walking around heaven going, I told you we should have gotten over that quicker, They're still talking about it 2,000 years later down there in Grand Prairie. Listen to them talking about us. I can't wait to hear their story on what's going on here. But these ladies have some kind of skirmish. And guys, this is not just a ladies' issue, okay? Because Paul has his issues as well with Peter and also with John Mark. He said, I don't even want to be around him. They all deal with this issue of church hurt. The question is, how do you deal with it? And in this particular situation, they were so worked up with each other that Paul has to put it in his letter for them to deal with. Now, we all know this kind of thing can happen in churches. You've been around church long enough. If you've ever served at a church before, if you've ever worked at a church before, you know that the church is an incredible building filled with broken people. It just is. And we're going to let each other down. There's one greeter that's mad at another greeter because they always show up late, or a children's worker's mad at another because they keep canceling. And then there's the big one. This is the biggest one of all. It's when somebody sits in your seat. I mean, I've never seen anything like this before. One of the reasons I walk around before service and say hi to people is because it's my way of taking roll. Because I know where you all sit every single week. And I can tell when you're not in your seat because somebody else is in it and you're right behind them just glaring at them. It's ruined your week, That's where I sit. That's where we've always sat, This is a big issue, bigger than those kind of issues. These ladies are not getting along, and Paul has to address it. In fact, Paul says, would somebody step in and help? Because I love these ladies. They have contended with me. They have cried with me. They have prayed with me. They have worked with me, and they've helped launch this church. For some of you that have been around here a very long time, you know what that feels like to start something and make the move and build a building, and you give resources and you start a ministry, and it's incredible. And Paul says, these ladies are so important to me. But here's the problem. Private trauma often turns into church drama. And whatever was going on with these two ladies, it began to become such an issue, Paul has to address it. Now let's get really personal here. Some of you are here today, or you're watching online, because you love the mission of Crossroads. You love the fact that we are all about helping people find and follow Jesus. You love the fact that we'll do anything short of sin to help your unchurched friend come to know Jesus. You love the fact that our children's ministry and student programming is just incredible for your family. You love our sports programming and all the stuff that we get to offer for your family there. But some of you are here today because you ran from someplace else. And can I just tell you this? I am really glad you are here. But you're going to find broken people here as well. And there's one of them on the stage right now. All of us have experienced church hurt, and often all of us have caused some level of church hurt. We're just broken people. We make mistakes. The question is not how do we get rid of the mistakes? Jesus already paid for them. The question is how do we live with each other so it doesn't destroy what God wants to do through his church. As long as there are people, there will be problems. That's the reality. So here's what Paul is showing us in this passage. True community is not an absence of conflict, but the presence of a reconciling spirit.